Started. So we are talking tonight about a pretty serious topic, but it's something that I think is so important to help with any of us who are working with children, but also frankly, I need this information. I need to ease my own fears around the pandemic, and I need to know what's the best way for me to help ease a child's fear, because the kids are picking up on this energy as well. So tonight we're talking about the pandemic, 5 essential strategies to help ease kids' fears. And my very special guest tonight on Monday with Coach Mel is Dr. Jonathan Dalton. And many of you will know Dr. Dalton because you've taken my Pediatric Feeding Disorders and Anxiety video course on my website. So he is here from pretty much the East Coast, and I'm way over here in Colorado, almost to the far west. And Dr. Dalton, I could tell everybody all the wonderful things about you, but I was wondering if you just take a minute to let everybody know about your center and who you are and why you love these kids so much.
Yeah, so I'm a licensed psychologist. I'm here in Maryland. I work in Virginia as well. I run an anxiety treatment center when we focus mostly on kids and teens who have a lot of anxiety with these nervous systems that are very easy to arouse and hard to soothe. I love what I do for many, many reasons. And one of the reasons I love what I do is that anxiety is so treatable and that kids, like adults, get better. They learn new skills, new ways of thinking. They develop a different relationship with their anxiety. And in so doing, they change their experience of it. So I love what I do.
That's great. And the name of your center is?
Oh, we're the Center for Anxiety and Behavioral Change. We call it CABC for short. But
okay. Great. Well, thanks so much for being here. I know you probably have so much information to share. Where do you want to start when we're talking about something that is raising everyone's anxiety? What can we do to really help ease our kids' fears?
Well, I think part of it isn't so much what we say. That's significant, but I think a bigger part of it is how we model for them the coping skills that we're using. And of course, it varies tremendously from the different age groups that we're talking about. So the younger the child is, the more shielded they are from understanding the circumstances that we all find ourselves in. The older the kid, the more they're going to be much more aware of it. My 9-year-old daughter was just singing some TikTok songs about the virus symptoms that I found her doing. And she was watching a TikTok that shows them symptoms to be on the lookout for. So they're getting it from all different sources the older they are. But I think part of it is to recognize that anxiety is an appropriate and normal reaction to stress. Mm-hmm. That evolution wants us to be anxious at the appropriate time. Evolution wants us to avoid things that make us sick, hurt, or scared. And right now, there's a lot of things going on that are certainly scary and that we are right in trying to avoid, like people who are coughing or different kinds of viruses that are present. So I think it's really important for all of us to be able to acknowledge that not every anxiety is a disorder and that sometimes anxiety is appropriate, but it's designed for us to be a prompt or cue to problem solve. It's supposed to be something where it orients us to threat cues in the environment and helps us to take reasonable and appropriate steps to reduce our risk. And so where it becomes dysfunctional is when it no longer is serving that purpose of orienting us to problem solving. So the adults who are watching updates on their phones constantly with new information coming out hour by hour, their body's going to be responding like that is another threat coming in rather than just a continuation of the previous threat that we were experiencing. And eventually it no longer serves the purpose of helping us to solve any problems. And then I think the kids, even the younger kids, I mentioned this in the course that we had done, that they are the baking soda in the fridge. They're going to soak up whatever is in the emotional environment and concentrate it. And so even if they might not know what's going on if they're young enough in the community at large, they are going to be able to sense the stress from mom and dad or whoever it is in the family that something isn't right, that some things are a little bit off right now and they don't make sense the way they used to. And they're going to experience that to a large degree.
I'm really glad that you brought up the fact that we're getting alerts all the time. And, you know, on social media too, I'll suddenly get an alert that the president's about to speak. And lately, you know, he's got a lot going on. So you'll see the press conference and there's nobody behind that podium, seriously, for like an hour, because it was supposed to start at 5, but naturally they're doing their best they can, and they arrive an hour later. Well, you know what the problem is I'm staring at that screen for an hour going, what's he going to say? What's he going to say? And I've really begun to realize that I don't need to listen to that. I'll find out later. I'm going to just tune in one time a day. There's nothing new that I need to know. If there is, they're going to make sure I find out about it. And it has really helped to keep my heart palpitations down and just get me to kind of breathe a little bit easier and be a little bit more present in the day.
Yeah, and I wish, you know, in addition to the social distancing, I wish there was social media distancing.
Yeah.
Right? Because there's so much that we're getting caught up in this, whether it's watching the news channels or our friends posting things on Twitter or whatever it may be, and it's overwhelming for us. And so I think it's really important that we model appropriate technology use for the older kids too, that we don't need to be beholden to the screen in our pocket, that we can choose how it is that we prioritize our day. And we can, you know, there's a lot of things we can't choose right now. We can't choose how long we're going to be in this situation. We can't choose the number of people who are going to get sick. There's so many things that we can't choose, but there is a lot that we can choose. And we can obviously choose how we spend our time. We can choose how we prioritize our day, whether or not we're living in accord with our values, in the presence of all of these larger stressors that are existing.
And, you know, you make me think about kids and maybe not understanding and saying, well, why can't I go play at the playground with the neighbor kids? They're out there right now, you know, because we are seeing each other out the window, and trying to help. Maybe you can help me find the words, but trying to help those kids understand we can't do that now, but here's what we can do.
Yeah, so again, it depends on the age range so much. And so for the younger kids, I think there's some bad germs out there.
Yeah.
And we don't want to go where the germs are. And these germs, they're invisible, so we can't see. And so because of that, we're going to take a lot of their precautions, because mom and dad, if there's two parents involved, or mom and mom, however it may be, we're going to take care of you, and we're going to make sure that you're safe. And so the kids really need to have that idea that there's grown-up worries and there's kid worries. And the kid worries are about what cartoon's going to come on next, or about, you know, whatever age-appropriate topic they're in. But the parents, we've got this covered in terms of safety and in terms of planning for their future and making sure that they're getting what they need.
Well, and I know you often talk about the 3 C's. Can you kind of explain to everyone about the 3 C's and how it applies to this situation?
Yeah. So we've been getting a lot of requests from families about what do we do? What do we do for our kids who are experiencing so much distress? And so I came up with these ideas. I call them the 3 C's just because they're easy to remember. The first one is continuity. The more that we can keep things as similar as they can be to the way they were a month ago, the better it is for the kids, and for adults for that matter too. So continuity means between what is now and what was there a month ago, but also in this terms of day to day. We know that kids and adults do much better with structure, with life being predictable, especially during a period when this is unpredictable. So really having continuity, that the kids have the same sleep and wake schedule, that they have the same time of meals, that they have scheduled activities that they're engaged in and involved in,
Yeah.
or that almost going, you know, line by line, hour by hour, how are we going to be filling our days? Because that's what they're used to in a school environment. These kids are used to having regimented schedules where we do X and then we do Y.
Right.
And they're not having that right now. And so that will serve two functions. It'll make it easier for them to transition into this space because it's going to look more like what they're used to. But we're also thinking long ball here in terms of when they do get back to school, the more that we can keep them structured right now, the easier the transition will eventually be, whenever that is, to get back into the school environment. So I think the continuity is really important.
So important, especially for me as a pediatric feeding therapist. It's one of the things I've been talking to my families about. I just sent them an email yesterday saying, you know, I know everybody's really busy, but it's so important for us to have that consistency so that your child doesn't regress. And I don't want to add one more thing onto your plate. All I'm asking you to do is what we were working on before all this happened, just keep doing it, keep having family dinners. And now we have more opportunity to do that, and try to be as consistent as possible so that when I am able to pick up with them, whether it's via teletherapy or whether it's I'm able to go back into their home, that we can just kind of pick up where we left off. So I really like that idea of continuity. And what were the other two C's?
So the other C is tied to that, which is connectivity.
Connectivity.
And so, for instance, we know that social support is vitamin C against depression and anxiety across the lifespan.
Yeah.
And here we are social distancing. People who we're closest to become people we have to be wary of being within 6 feet of. And so kids are actually more well suited than their parents and grandparents are right now, because so much of their lives they've grown up in as a digital native, the term is, and so they're very accustomed to talking to their friends who might live in geographically distant locations.
Sure.
Or they're on Snapchat or whatever it may be, and so they're doing okay with that. But it's really important that we maintain that connectivity, and that happens in a wide variety of different ways. And this is where parents can model that for their kids. So having to adapt, being able to say, okay, well, we can't connect in the way we were right now. We will again at some point.
Yeah.
But what can we do right now? I love that quote from Darwin where he said that evolution doesn't favor the strongest or even the most intelligent. It favors the most adaptable.
The most adaptable.
And so I think that right now we are all having to adapt in record time to record changes in our daily lives, in our existence. And so it's really important that we are able to not abandon the connectivity that supports us, but find new ways to access it. And that means also finding new innovative experiences. I think that unfortunately most of the history of trauma in our societies have also been engines for innovation, where we have to figure out new ways of doing things. So I have teens now who have found Google Hangouts for virtual friends they're just meeting. It's kind of like everyone's a freshman in college again, where everyone's looking to meet new people online based on common interests. And I think that they're really adaptive in finding ways to connect. That means also with the friends from school, even the younger kids having virtual play dates. I have a lot of kids who will have their iPad open and they're playing Legos and their friends are playing Legos and they're not talking very often until they construct what they're doing and they say, look what I did. And
yeah.
So it's like parallel play, but through a distance.
Yeah, yeah, I love that. Even the other night, I have a daughter and a son-in-law who are in San Francisco sheltering in place, and I have another daughter here in Denver, and of course, Bob and I in the Boulder area, and we just all got to Google Hangout and had virtual dinner together, and it was so much fun. It was so much fun, and we didn't talk about anything negative, we just talked about silly things and family and their dogs, and I can't tell you what a difference it made for me. Just that short, maybe it was 30 minutes together. Man, did I feel better for a good 24 hours after that.
Yeah, I mean, there's kids that I know and teens who are watching movies with their friends. So they'll watch the same movie, cue it at the same time, and then have their devices open so that they can watch it together, but in very different locations.
That's so cool.
So that connectivity, which leads into the other C, which is creativity. I think that humans have a natural instinct to want to express ourselves when we're in high stress situations. Yeah. And so I've been asking most of my patients of different ages to really work on expressive arts, to be able to, whether it's writing a short story, doing picture taking, making TikToks for the younger kids, meeting them where they are, drawing, coloring, whatever it may be, having some way to express themselves. So creativity, I think, is just so important to have people being able to express what they're going through. And kids obviously do that in a multi-sensory way.
Right.
And so I think that's a very important thing. But creativity also means finding new and innovative ways to live our lives, whether it's to connect with other people or it means, what's something that I would like to be able to do? I have a patient who's an older, teenager, but he needs to get in better shape, or he wants to. And so we did our telesession this week while he was on his treadmill.
Oh.
Because he's like, you know what? I'm going to do my exercise now when I'm talking to you. And so looking at ways to be creative and finding opportunities here, because I do believe that challenge is always pregnant with possibility and opportunity.
Mhm.
And so right now when we're experiencing this, I think part of what we want to model for the kids is that, yeah, this is legitimately scary. This is a hard time. We are taking reasonable steps to keep everyone that we love safe. But in this, there's also some opportunity for us to become better at something, to recommit ourselves to our values. I know a lot of people have been telling me that they've been feeling so busy recently,
Right.
with life, with kids' activities and their own work schedule and different things. And this is a chance for us to slow down, take inventory of our priorities, to see whether or not they're reflective of our values, to recommit ourselves to those values, which for most people involve relationships, making those our first priority.
Yeah.
And I'm seeing a lot of times now with the school age kids, they're not being graded. They're given assignments to work on, but they're not being graded on that. So it's a paradigmatic shift there too, for them to focus more on education than the outcome of what grade they get. And so I'm hoping this is going to be a re-examination of a lot of different things that we've been taking for granted about, at least in the area where I live. There's a lot of hyper-competitive schools where kids feel like they need to do well in school to live up to the expectations of family or to get into the right next school or whatever it may be. And I'm hoping now there can be a re-examination of those things. And I think this is an opportunity for parents to be able to model that for their spouses, for their friends, for the kids. Talk about what really matters right now. And we're seeing this with a clarity that is unusual in most of our lives.
I think it's such a good opportunity, actually, an excellent opportunity to really reflect on what we're able to do now compared to what we couldn't do 2 months ago because we were all so busy. And I am guilty of that 100%. And it, it is, I'm getting to experience what it's like to slow down. And it's good for me. It's a good thing.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And, and kind of expanding on what I was saying before, a lot of my kids and families I'm working with right now are doing very well.
Good.
They, they've been trained how to tolerate uncertainty. They've been trained how to separate thoughts from evidence. They've been able to be informed observers of their own emotional experiences. And they know how to handle this. And so most of my kids and their families are actually saying, we're doing better than the average person is right now because we've been trained how to respond to this. And
Yeah.
I think this is an opportunity for everyone else to kind of step up to the plate too and to learn some of these more foundational skills about how to acknowledge and hold present the emotion, but to deal with it in a way that a palm tree deals with the wind. That we don't fight against it because we don't need to. We can sit with it, we can tolerate it. We are strong enough to experience these emotions. And
Yeah.
or we try and avoid these emotions by trying to find some quick and easy path out of them, the more paradoxically we'll suffer because we're not learning that we can tolerate these experiences.
So we're not going to discount a child's fear. We're not, oh, you're fine. Oh, come on. It's all right. It's just like having the flu. I heard somebody say that the other day. And we're not going to discount the child's fear, but what we are going to do is acknowledge that this is a natural reaction. Makes sense, right? But we're also going to be careful to model calm for them and 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 be okay with these emotions, but also move on, right? In other words, not dwell on it throughout the day, where we don't want the kids talking about it nonstop, but how much should we allow them essentially to talk about it? What signs should we look for?
So the first part of it, I love what you were saying there because what we train a lot of our patients and their families is the idea that we can be anxious and. So I see kids who are too afraid to go to school. That's my specialty, school refusal. And so I've been asking some of my kids, finish the sentence for me. I can be anxious and. And I had one girl who missed a lot of school. She was in high school and she thought about it for a second and she said, I can be anxious and strong.
Oh,
I can be anxious and brave. And I asked somebody else who's been more experienced in treatment for a long time, and I said, he's a high school student too. I said, how would you finish that sentence? And he paused and he said, I can be anxious and anything I want to be. And so I think that that's the first thing is it's not a dichotomy, it's a dialectic, that you can be both. You can be anxious and productive, right? But we also don't want to get stuck in a feedback loop of constantly checking our phone for reassurance,
mhm.
right? Because when we're doing that, when we're checking the phone, what we're really doing is we're trying to gain some kind of predictability or certainty over our experience. And so we're waiting for good news from Italy, or we're looking for some new breakthrough, or we're looking for bad news. And it becomes a ritualistic event where we're constantly in this feedback loop of searching for a way to be less anxious, but in the same time, maintaining a very high level of anxiety. And so what we want to do is to be able to allow it to be present and to change the channel as the need comes. So more like, I said in the meeting that we'd had before in the video session, that when kids have anxiety, it's kind of like a kid is afraid of a butterfly. We don't want to teach them ways to avoid butterflies. We want to teach them that butterflies can't hurt you. Now, the COVID-19 can hurt you, right? So it's a little bit different. But the thoughts of COVID-19 can't.
Yeah. And
so we want to teach the kids that having thoughts and fears and feelings about being sick is normal and appropriate and is not anything more than having a scary thought.
Right.
And so scary thoughts are just stories we're telling ourselves. And we don't want to overvalue those thoughts, because in so doing, we empower them.
Yeah. We don't want to overvalue those thoughts, because in doing so, we empower them.
Right.
Right. I personally am really soaking this in, because I take it upon myself to protect my family. And so I think I tend to check for those updates from the president, et cetera, too often, because I want to make sure I'm not missing anything, because it's my job to protect them. When the reality is, that's not helping me. That's not helping me at all. We're going to be taking questions here in just a few minutes. So if you have a question for Dr. Dalton about pediatric anxiety, please type them in now, and we'll definitely put those up on the screen and try to address all of them if we can, but please type them in now. Meanwhile, I'm going to have Dr. Dalton just share a little tiny bit more. I was wondering, and I'm throwing this question out to you blind, because we haven't talked about this, but one of the things that I'm wondering about, because I do have a lot of kids on my caseload with pediatric feeding disorders and some underlying anxiety that, you know, in the right circumstances could spill into an anxiety disorder. And in the next few months, are there any signs that we as professionals should, or parents should, watch for, where we feel like where the kid was just feeling that anxiety, and it's perfectly fine, you know, it's adaptive anxiety, but now it feels like we've gone past that? Are there any red flags for that we should watch for? And one of the things that's coming through my mind is, what happens when the kids go back to school in the fall?
Yeah, great question. So so the first thing there is avoidance is the purest measure of anxiety. And so in most of our cases, we treat avoidance, and if we do that effectively, the anxiety will kind of die a natural death. That being said, all of these individual fears, whether it's feeding related or otherwise, I think of those as boats that float on an ocean of stress. And as the stress rises, so do the boats. Okay. And so we're going to see an increase in other kinds of stress related problems, whether it's IBS, or anything else that is GI related. We're going to see an increase most likely in those experiences. What parents are going to look out for is increases in avoidance that's no longer appropriate. So when the lockdowns are lifted, when people are no longer required to socially distance, and I know there's great uncertainty of when that's going to be, and we can tolerate the uncertainty, but if the urge to avoid kind of persists in the absence of a need to, that's something that we want to pay close attention to. If we're seeing differences in sleeping habits, nightmares, again, at age-appropriate levels, if we're seeing kids who are really showing signs of kind of decreased interest or pleasure, they seem blah or sad. You know, I had a 12-year-old tell me a long time ago he had depression, and he said that for him, having depression was like his life had become a stick of chewing gum that had lost its flavor. And unfortunately, what's happening right now is this petri dish for depression to grow on, where we're isolated, we're disconnected, we are not as productive as we want to be, we're limited in terms of what we can do. And so I'm actually as concerned about increases in pediatric depression as I am in pediatric anxiety, because of the circumstances that we're in. And so changes in eating, sleeping, irritability, increase in a lot of those kinds of of ordinary experiences, but I trust the parents to use your intuition too. If you're concerned about something, it probably makes sense to have someone take a look at what's going on.
Such good information. I can see lots of questions popping up here. I'm going to see if I can put one up here on the screen for you. Megan asks, Dr. Dalton, do you have a Facebook page or a resource of videos we can refer to if we need it, or any books you've written? I'm smiling because I'm always after you to write a book. And I love your metaphors. I love his metaphors too, Megan. And I'm going to have Dr. Dalton answer that question, but just to let for everyone listening, because I know we have people from all over the world, I have the good fortune of having Dr. Dalton do a course for me on my website, melaniepotock.com. And I have a few snippets of it on my YouTube channel, but good fortune that he was able to really spend 2.5 hours with me and just do what he's doing now. I'm so grateful for it. But Dr. Dalton, are there any other resources? I know you've done several talks about, especially about school anxiety. What else can we offer for Megan?
Yeah, so Megan, thank you. I've been so busy, I haven't had a chance to write a book, but who knows now? Depending how long it goes on, that's on my back plate of things to work on it. But not that there's a need for anxiety. There's not a decrease in need for anxiety treatment right now, unfortunately. So I'm as busy as I was before. I do love giving talks, and I on our website, changeanxiety.com, on the bottom link, there's a lot of videos that I and my colleagues have done. So I've given 1.5-hour long versions of how to parent an anxious kid on that website. They're on YouTube. And different ones. There must be 7 or 8 of them on there at this point. So feel free to look at those. It's actually the first part of what we often do for parent training when we see patients. So they'll give people some really good counterintuitive skills, because the more compassionate the parent is, the more vulnerable they are for reinforcing anxious behavior. And there's really good research to show that reducing that parent accommodation of anxious behavior can really reduce the suffering in the kids.
Yeah, it's so important as parents. I think I mentioned to you when we were teaching our video course together that one of my parents said it so well. She said, I'm beginning to realize that the change in my child begins with the change in me. Tell everyone your website one more time.
Sure, it's changeanxiety.com.
Fantastic. We have another question here, actually a statement that I think is a really, really touching one from Claudia. She says, my child is scared of going upstairs on her own. When we are all downstairs, she gets so anxious when she has to do it.
So separation anxiety is the most common anxiety of childhood. There's 4 pillars to it. There's the fear of being alone, fear of abandonment, worry about calamitous events, and fear of physical illness. I won't go into the weeds of all of those things. What you're talking about there is fear of being alone. And so what I do in those situations, Claudia, is I have a lot of fun with the kids. And so we will do a scavenger hunt. Everybody has Monopoly in their house somewhere. We take out the dollars from the Monopoly money. We hide them on a different floor. And the really high denomination ones are hidden really well. And the kids go upstairs on a floor different from where you are, or they go downstairs into the basement. You stay, 1 or 2 floors away from them. And the longer they spend up there by themselves, the more exposure they have because they're doing the activity. And the more time they have, the more of the prizes they'll get. And by the way, denominations can be turned in for things of value, like a grab box or something along those lines. But it's just backdoor therapy. It's a way to encourage them with high levels of reinforcement to do what's scary to them. And our magic trick in our field is that we turn fear into boredom by just doing things long enough or often enough. We can violate their expectancies. They're having a good time while they're being upstairs, apart from family, doing something on a scavenger hunt with a flashlight, whatever it may be, the more we're going to accelerate the reduction in their anxiety. So basically, we help them to lean forward into their anxiety.
Yeah. And so tell me if I'm understanding this correctly, but it feels like what you're also saying is that it's not that we're doing something to distract them from the feelings. What we're actually teaching them is it's okay to feel that way, and we can play this game.
Yeah, I mean, you said the metaphors. One of the ones I use for the kids a lot is that, when you're 8 and you're out there in the ocean and a big wave starts to curl in and your instincts are to run back to shore.
Right.
Well, your older siblings out there saying, no, don't run back. The wave's faster than you are. It'll catch you. The best thing to do is the most counterintuitive of all things. It's to dive directly into the wave. And when you do that, 2 things happen. Number 1 is that you can do it again, and now you can stay out there and have more fun. But probably more importantly is you've learned that you can cope with whatever waves come. We call that self-efficacy, how effective you think you can be in response to your own anxious cues. And that's a huge part of what we do is we build kids up so that they can understand accurately that, wow, this anxiety, it picked on the wrong kid, didn't it? Look what you're able to do when it shows up.
Yeah, I love that. I love that. I think we probably have a couple more questions that are coming in just a second. So I want to give everybody a few minutes before I let you go to make sure we don't miss any. But I will definitely add in the comments Dr. Dalton's website, et cetera, and any other links to videos, et cetera. But if anybody else has any more questions that you want to ask Dr. Dalton, please type them in as quickly as you can. We'll stay on for a few more minutes. And then I also want to encourage everyone to please share this video. I think this is going to be so helpful for parents and professionals alike. So the more shares, the more people we're going to be able to help. So I hope that everybody will make sure to do that, especially if you belong to any Facebook groups. This is a great one to share on a Facebook group. Again, both from a parenting perspective or professionals. I think, I'm going to double check real quick here. Oh, you know what? Somebody was just mentioning that, Patty was mentioning that she said she just had her first day of teletherapy. For those of you listening, many of the professionals like myself, speech language pathologist in this case, are suddenly having to learn how to do teletherapy. There are many of us who have done it before, but now we're doing it 100% of the time. And, it's like, whoa, I have to learn this overnight. But a lot of really great things have come out of it, and that people are reporting, you know what, this is really working. And there's great research behind it. And the parents are like, this was so good. I'm so glad we connected. And it really gets back to what you were saying, Dr. Dalton, is that we want to be careful with social distancing, that we're not also distancing from each other from some of the technology that we can use to stay connected and to do therapy. And I think it's so good for the kids to see the people that they're used to seeing at school or in their home, to at least know, I care enough that I want to connect with you over this video platform. So I really want to encourage everybody who's listening, who's perhaps switching to teletherapy, to help their patients, that it's going to be okay. The kids love it, and it doesn't have to go perfect the first time. And it's a great way to really connect. Really connect.
Different ways too. So I'm doing obviously all of our sessions by telehealth too, and I found some ways that's actually in some ways superior. So the kids can walk around with a laptop and show me their room. I've met more cats and dogs this week as I'm in people's houses, doing these things. They're able to share more of their life than they can when they walk into my office. And so part of what I'm doing is encouraging that rather than seeing it as a distraction. It's more of a deeper level of connection when they're able to show me, like almost like show and tell, these are the important parts of my life that you never get to see, and now you can. And so I think that if we do this the right way, we can really, drill down a little bit more deeply and to connect in a different, more full way with these kids too.
I think that's so important for us as adults when we're getting together with our team members. Maybe I need to speak to the OT or the gastroenterologist, or if we're working, for example, one of my daughters works for Twitter, and she was telling me that people are putting their kids on their laps and saying, this is my daughter. And it's so fun. It's a way to connect that she's never had a chance to connect with, because they all see each other in the office. So I love that too. And it's so good for all of us to be able to share those moments. Yeah. We have another comment here from Kelly, and she says, I have been offered an opportunity to volunteer in the community, handing out food to our school-aged kids. My daughter is concerned that I would be allowed to go out into the community, and I can't quite see the rest of it. I think it might be that she can't understand. Can you just speak to that a little bit, please?
Yeah, I think part of it is that kids have a hard time understanding sometimes why there is different rules for grown-ups and for kids. Yeah. And sometimes it's a reasonable question that they're asking. And I think a part of it is to understand that parents have more experience, they have more knowledge base, and they also, frankly, have better self-control to make sure that they're keeping 6 feet apart from people in appropriate ways. And so just like adults can drive cars and younger kids can't drive cars, even though they can play video games of cars driving. The same, because it wouldn't be safe. And it's not because they can't reach the steering wheel. It's because they're not mature enough to be able to do it in a safe way. And I think a similar thing is really tied into our experience here too, that when parents are out in the community, whether they're an essential worker and they're out there, working in hospitals or doing other things, is they're trained for this. They're prepared for this in a way that no kid could, because this is a grown-up worry. This is not a kid worry. And so the grown-up
worry.
Precautions.
Yeah, I'm just always going to remember that this is a grown-up worry. This is a grown-up worry. Mm-hmm. So I can't thank you enough for being here tonight. I know it's going to help so many families, and I know I've taken you away from your family tonight to do this for us. So on behalf of everyone listening and everyone who's going to be sharing this video, I just wanted to say thank you. And I just wish you well, and I'll be talking to you soon. And to everyone else listening, I hope all of you are practicing some good self-care and really cherishing the time that you have with your families right now, and the chance to learn new things like telehealth and ways to connect, like virtual dinner, that sort of thing. So until next week, I wanted to say stay well, and thank you very much, Dr. Dalton, and thank you to all of you. Good night, everybody.
Bye, everybody.